Just want to say welcome, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. I'm Chris Brooks, and today we're going to talk about data and its influence on successful AI. During this webinar, please feel free to use the chat for questions and comments. We'll have some time at the end for some Q&A. And just as quick housekeeping, the session is being recorded. If you'd prefer not to be included, feel free to disconnect now. The recording will be shared once it's available. All right. Let's get started. So I want to do a quick introduction. As I said, I'm Chris Brooks. I've spent the past 20 plus years working in ERP and enterprise systems, primarily within SAP environments, helping organizations solve business problems with various technologies, driving measurable business outcomes. And today as a guest speaker, we have Chris Hogan. He's our AI solution architect and resident AI expert, also with 20 plus years experience working in ERP and enterprise systems. And Chris has been instrumental in helping VistaVu and our clients operationalize AI, transforming data strategy into real world performance gains. So by the end of the session today, you'll walk away with 4 practical takeaways is our goal. First, how to identify the 4 data foundations that determine whether AI scales or stalls: quality, governance, integration, and reusability. These pillars quietly shape performance long before the models, become the issue. Second, we'll unpack why AI struggles when data is fragmented or poorly governed. Often it's not the algorithm that's failing, it's the gaps in the context, the ownership, or integration that limit performance. Third, you'll see practical examples of how AI is already embedded in ERP and operational workflows today. These examples show what's possible when the foundation is strong. And fourth, we'll look at how AI maturity and data maturity grow together and what it takes to scale, specifically what separates isolated pilots and experiments from repeatable corporate AI gains. And the goal isn't just to understand AI, it's to understand what enables it to deliver that sustained value. I first want to set the stage with some context for how important data is for AI. And if we look at ChatGPT-3 class models, which came out a few years ago, they're trained on roughly 570 gigabytes of high quality data. And that's, to put it in context, that's about 190 million pages of text. If we were to print that, it would reach 19 kilometers high stacked. And it would take one person roughly 700 years of nonstop reading to get through it all. Which is a crazy amount of data. And versions we have now are generation 4 and generation 5, which have consumed even more data. And it took GPT-3 that amount of data to reach a tipping point where it suddenly became usable generic AI. Nobody talks about GPT version 1 and 2. They just were not there. And so I wanted to just set that context because we're not here to talk about building your own models, but that has its own level of complexity. But we're here to talk about what 95% of companies will do with AI, which is called the inference with corporate context. So said differently, these models don't create much business value for you unless you give it context like your customer data, your emails, your financials, your policies, etc. And this business context is essentially your corporate data. And just like, OpenAI and these ChatGPT models needed, the 190 million pages of data, your company also needs to feed the AI with data as well. And fortunately, with inference, you don't need near as much data to build the models as you do to use the models. The wide accessibility of AI tooling, is a huge step forward, but it also means that you need to think about data in your corporate context as a differentiator in your market. And we're at a point where AI models and enterprise AI systems are becoming commoditized. Like your competitors have access to the same AI models and systems that you do. Access now is no longer an advantage. The difference is no longer the model. It comes down to how well that model understands your business. And that determines how far you can go with AI. two companies that have the exact same AI system and models can get very different outcomes. And the reason why is that one can have structured, trusted, connected data, and the other doesn't, and the results are dramatic. And if you want to outperform your competition, the goal isn't to use AI, it's to solve the right business problems with AI. We want it to drive better operational results, reducing manual effort, process friction. We want to create institutional knowledge and embed it directly in our workflows. And we want faster and higher confidence, decisions from the AI. And AI can definitely enable these outcomes, but only if it's grounded in your data, your processes, and how your company operates. If your data foundation is fragmented, AI will scale this fragmentation, unfortunately. But if the data is strong, AI will scale that as your institutional knowledge. And so we're going to talk about what does this data foundation look like? And so while there's many data frameworks out there, successful AI and data initiatives consistently rely on 4 core foundations: quality, governance, integration, and reusability. So when we talk about AI-ready data, the first and foremost foundational pillar is quality. AI systems, they're starting to reason a bit more, but they still don't reason like humans do. So if there's bad data that it's finding, or is finding contradictory results, which would be super evident to anybody on your team to say, yeah, that doesn't make sense or that's wrong, AI can still easily miss this, and this can be challenging. The more we use AI, the more we need to trust its answers and outputs. And without this trust, that user adoption plummets immediately and is very difficult to recover from. The biggest lever to this trust is quality data. If a customer is labeled differently in 2 systems, AI sees 2 versions of the truth and will just randomly pick one as that being the truth. And it may not be consistent depending on who's using it. It'll switch back and forth. If a field is blank, AI may make some guesses at what it thinks the data should be. And if processes aren't standardized, AI will reflect that inconsistency back to you. The business impact is straightforward. High quality data improves accuracy, reduces risk, increases trust, and ultimately determines whether AI initiatives scale successfully or they stall. And if we get this pillar right, everything else becomes a little bit more easy and a little bit more achievable. When we move from quality to governance, the focus shifts from is the data good to is the data controlled and protected? In AI systems, governance becomes even more critical because AI makes information easier to access and faster to distribute. If permissions are misaligned, AI can unintentionally expose sensitive financial data, HR information, customer prices, or contract details. What used to require effort to find now can surface essentially instantly. And that's why governance must ensure role-based access, least privileged permissions, and have clear policies around how AI can use and expose data. Strong governance ensures the right people see the right information. AI respects existing security boundaries. Actions are traceable and auditable, and compliance requirements are preserved. Without governance, AI essentially amplifies the risk that you have in your data. But with governance, AI becomes scalable and more trustworthy. I like to think of the governance as kind of the guardrails that allow AI to move faster without increasing your exposure of your data. So the integration pillar is straightforward, but it's also critical. AI can only consume the data that it can access. If systems are disconnected, AI operates with partial context. So when the integration is weak, we see problems like answers from AI that look complete but are missing essential details that can mislead the user. summaries that ignore the latest project status because that information lives in a disconnected system. Recommendations that conflict with finance because ERP and CRM data may not be aligned. And this is how partial answers turn into false confidence that the AI will distribute. Yeah. Strong integration enables cross-system reasoning and workflow automation. It reduces duplicate records and conflicting outputs, and it improves the reliability of AI-driven recommendations and actions. And what good looks like here is core systems are connected. Data flows are clean and well defined. Manual exports and shadow spreadsheets are minimized or hopefully eliminated. And integration are designed for real-time or near real-time access. AI is only as good as the connected data that it can see. If the integration is weak, AI sounds confident but operates with blind spots. And if the AI is strong, AI becomes consistent, trustworthy as well, and usable in day-to-day workflows. Reusability is the last one, and it's about ensuring that the data, the logic, and knowledge assets can be consistently leveraged across the systems, teams, and AI use cases, without being recreated or reinterpreted every single time you're doing experimentation or working on a new initiative. If business logic is duplicated across tools, outputs begin to drift. If data definitions vary, AI experiences start to conflict. And when every team builds its own interpretation layer, scaling becomes slow and expensive. And this is opposite to most of our goals. You've likely experienced some form of this, using variations of reports that can tell different stories. That's what we're trying to eliminate when we look at reusability in terms of data for AI consumption. The reusability enables the consistent outputs across tools and workflows. It reduces duplication of data and logic, and it prevents conflicting answers across AI experiences. And it accelerates the rollout of new use cases across the organization. And here, what good looks like is, there's a single, trusted source for key, business entities. Business logic is standardized across systems. APIs, data models, and semantic layers are reusable rather than rebuilt for every initiative or every use case. And the AI use cases are built on that shared data foundation and not in isolated silos. And that's where you get the scale and the repeatability and the consistency at scale. And when these elements are in place, new AI initiatives launch faster, outputs remain aligned, and governance becomes simpler. Reusability is what allows AI to scale cleanly without multiplying that complexity in your organization. So now that we've got a better sense of the influence and importance of data with successful AI, I want to hand it over to Chris Hogan, who's going to walk you through how SAP has been addressing some of these issues within their products.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. We can advance to the next slide. So you heard there, so Chris Brooks did a great job setting up those pillars of a strong data foundation. And I think we would all agree, in principle, it's simple, it's straightforward, right? It's understandable, but in practice, actually putting those things into place and actually making all of those things work within our organizations, it's actually really, really hard. So what is SAP doing to help customers in the mid-market solve that problem of bringing together their data in a way that it can be trusted for the business problems they're trying to solve, for the business questions they're trying to answer, right? Whether that's reports, whether it's dashboards, or whether it's AI. So that really is what SAP is focusing on with their data strategy. And on the right-hand side, what you see there is that's SAP's apps, data, and AI flywheel. So you would have heard Christian Klein talking about this in the keynotes in webinars. You'll see it in SAP's materials. And what does it mean? Well, it means that you can't have good AI without good data, and you can't have good data without good apps that are collecting that data. And The long story short, SAP has been in the business of business critical applications for decades. They've got the breadth across all the different lines of business, and they've got the depth of functionality. And so the bottom there, that really is what's bringing in, right? Those apps are bringing in high quality data. We're going to unpack the middle layer here, which is they're bringing in a focused, basically like a data layer as a service to customers to help solve this complicated part of unifying data and making it trusted for and available for all those other use cases you want, like reporting and AI. And then at the top band there are the AI use cases, whether it's in Joule or embedded AI functionality directly within like the ERP, or even custom AI. So we're going to move to the next slide there, Chris, and I'll unpack what we mean here by this data foundation. So Business Data Cloud is a solution that SAP has brought to market. And really what it is it's a data layer as a service, essentially. And Chris Brooks was speaking about those pillars, right, of a strong data foundation. And essentially, here's how Business Data Cloud helps address those pillars and helps you in a much simpler way bring together a strong data foundation. At the bottom, we've got those apps, right, bringing in that high quality data. Those can be SAP apps, right? Either your SAP Cloud ERP, or they could be other SAP line of business applications. But you'll see over on the right-hand side, they can even be non-SAP apps. So, right, whatever your best of breed apps are, maybe for your CRM, Salesforce, whatever, fill in the blank, those apps, right? So then the next thing is once we've got that quality data coming into those systems of record, like Chris Brooks is talking about, is the integration, right? Bringing that data together in a real-time fashion into some place centralized that we can then do something with it. So that's what the integration is. And SAP is integrating SAP data in real time. And it's also got mechanisms that you can use the same business data cloud frameworks to bring in data from other non-SAP data sources. Then there's the reusability. And there's two pieces there to the data reusability. There's data products, and then there's the harmonized data models. And the harmonized data model and data products, probably the simplest way to think about this actually is if we think back to the example Chris Brooks was talking about with customer records. Probably in your own organization, you've got all kinds of different systems. And if you were to try to answer just a very simple question, how many customers do we have? You might get 5 different answers, because if you ask the sales folks, they're going to check the CRM. If you ask marketing, they're going to check their marketing automation tool. If you check finance, they're probably going to check the ERP. If you ask support, they're probably going to check their support tool. So it's no doubt, right, that we get 5 different questions to a very answers to a very simple question. But if we take that same example, essentially what a data product is looking at customer and now turning it into a product. And what that means is it's almost like software, right? Like when you have software, you've got software that you install, say, in your phone or in your computer, and it's got version 1, and then it's version 2, and then it's version 3. And it went through some kind of process to come together, right? It was developed, it was tested, it was refined, and it was stamped with approval to be made available for you to consume. And that's essentially what a data product is. So instead of having customer records in all these different places, it's brought together into one place. It goes through a consistent process of cleaning and processing and deduplication. And while it's going through all of that, what we get at the end is basically one unified object that represents a customer record. And that is the golden source of truth. While it was going through that processing, what the harmonized data model means is we didn't just pull all that data from the source systems and just keep what we needed. We also brought along all the other stuff that the CRM tracks, and all the other stuff that marketing tracks, and all the other stuff the ERP tracks, so that we've got those additional data elements, metadata that describes those different attributes from those different systems. All of that comes together in this one data product. So that actually is one of the hardest parts to do if you're trying to do any of this yourself, is like unifying that data. But when you've got a solution like that, then reusability is what you now have. The last piece to this is the governance, right? When we already talked around elements of in a controlled, processed way of capturing data from these different sources and bringing them through and refining them. But even once you've got your data products and you want to make them available to business users to create reports or dashboards or developers to create AI use cases, even there, you've got control within Business Data Cloud in terms of who can have access to those data products and how much access that they can have. So that is essentially what Business Data Cloud is. It's a data layer as a service that you can subscribe to and helps bring together your data through through this quality integration and reusability and governance framework. If you advance to the next slide, Chris, the last two slides here actually just unpack, once you've got Business Data Cloud and it brings all this together, how users consume this, it's analytics, right? It's dashboards, it's reports, it's AI use cases. One that we're seeing here is an intelligent app, essentially, that's been built on top of Business Data Cloud. And this is one that's serving working capital. So essentially, if you're in finance, you really care about how much cash is tied up in the business and where it's tied up. So we're seeing here essentially a dashboard, and you can see, the different KPIs along the top, and you can kind of see how the working capital has been trending over time. You can see where the breakdown is, right? Whether it's, in cash or in inventory or in receivables. You can advance to the next marker there, Chris, at about 1 minute. We'll see here now kind of a similar detail, right? We can get into details specifically around accounts receivable, accounts payable. So as we're kind of flipping through this, right, at first glance, well, this just looks like a report. It just looks like a dashboard, no big deal. But that's not really what Business Data Cloud is solving. That's not the problem. If we think about where all this different data had to come from, all the different source systems, all the different data elements, all the processing it would have had to go through so that when we show this to anybody, they would trust it. It's that part that Business Data Cloud is solving. What we're seeing here is just the end, consumption that the user is able to now use to consume this data. So this is an example of an intelligent app that's been built on top of Business Data Cloud. It's one that's already released. It's based off of data from SAP Cloud ERP Private. If we flip to the next slide, Chris, we'll just see another example. This one here is one that's on the 2026 roadmap. I think it's due sometime to come out here in Q1. And it's looking just at a different angle, right? So this is looking at sales data, but essentially with a perspective, a finance perspective, right? So really a lot of different things in terms of sales relative to the finances. And so again, as we look at this, these are two examples of analytics. So whether it's a report or a dashboard, but you would have also heard, in terms of AI and AI use cases, if we take a step back and we think about basically what Business Data Cloud is giving us in this platform of trusted data products, we can equally build, and SAP, has like AI use cases, just like you would build analytics use cases. So that's essentially what Business Data Cloud is, and that's how SAP is helping the mid-market provide this data layer, so you don't have to build all those pieces yourself. Back over to you, Chris. I think you're just muted, Chris.
Yeah, perfect. Just thank you so much, Chris. I was thinking about like the quality aspect and how the Data Cloud has those little mini apps and how quality is a hard one to get right, and how all those little pieces can kind of help each data element, because you have better workflows, better processes, better data element, and better structured data, which definitely helps AI get higher quality results. That's great.
Yeah, the quality is really, one of the biggest things, because I think all of us can relate. We've all been in that meeting where that question was asked and you gave your answer, and then we all looked left and all looked right because they all had different answers. That's exactly what the solution is aimed to solve. Yeah.
Awesome. So I want to talk to you guys a little bit about a challenge that we've been working through at VistaVu, strengthening our data foundation. At VistaVu, we take pride in building long, healthy, successful customer partnerships. And because of that, the customer journey has been a focus for us for years now. And we've asked ourselves, like, how do we measure this? How do we understand it? How do we improve it over time? And, it started with, the Net Promoter Score is something that we've been doing, and we'll continue doing. It's great, but it's also just a snapshot in time that's done quarterly. And between those surveys, there's a constant flow of interactions, transactions, service events, projects, payments, and that information is being captured in our organization, but it's not being consolidated or operationalized beyond the silos that it exists in. And at any given point in time, no single person or system could see what we talked about is the full customer journey with us. Sales is tracking opportunities, support is managing tickets, professional services are tracking projects, finance is handling the billing and invoicing, and each person has their own silo of emails, chats, and meeting details. And each team had visibility into their own function, their department, but the details about the customer journey get lost as the data becomes siloed and as the customer transitions through different parts of our organization or interacts with different parts of our organization. And the impact isn't dramatic in any one specific area. It becomes subtle and cumulative over time. This shows up as limited cross-team visibility and many back and forth emails between departments. It shows up sometimes as inconsistent customer experiences across our teams. And it shows as teams not being connected to each other, understanding necessarily the full perspective that the customer has in working with us. And in this scenario, like, the systems weren't wrong, like they were simply just disconnected from each other and from the users. And disconnected data, leads generally to disconnected decisions. With the rise of AI, the questions, then become, how can AI help solve this problem? Because it is a hard problem to solve. And the solution is a unified customer view, and this has existed in, other forms over the past 10 years, but there's none as powerful as what we envision, leveraging AI. And today, as I mentioned, the information exists, like project details, many communication threads and topics, service history, time recordings, implementation and customization details, but it lives in different systems or individual files. And we're building towards bringing that together into a single shared customer view. We're early in this effort, and we still have a ways to go, but the direction is clear. It reflects a deliberate focus on strengthening our data foundation first, before trying to scale AI or add more layers or more tools. We're focused on creating cleaner, more reliable data, some stronger governance around access, better workflow integration so that things are automated, and structures that allow information to be reused across teams for different use cases. The foundation changes with AI are what make the unified view possible. And as we connect the numerous data points, we'll begin enabling something more powerful than simply out-of-the-box reporting. Support will become more proactive and contextual. AI will be able to surface more insights that anticipate needs. Projects become more transparent and outcomes more predictable. And most importantly, customers experience consistency, regardless of what team they interact with. And this isn't just about internal efficiencies. It's about delivering a cohesive, reliable experience, over time, over that customer journey that we go on together. And in addition, we've purposely aligned, the vision of this initiative with our customer for life company strategy. And we'll talk about that in a minute, as it's an important element for AI maturity. So we've talked about the data foundations that enable AI, and you've seen some examples of how AI is already being used in real workflows. Now I want to shift the conversation a little bit to AI maturity, because this is what separates experimentation from sustainable value. So you can have wildly successful pilots, even generate lots of excitement about it, but without organizational readiness, it doesn't translate into a meaningful enterprise, impact. So right now we're seeing still most organizations experimenting with AI. They're using it in very isolated use cases and seeing some small scale wins. There's a lot of curiosity and momentum, which is very good and it's very healthy. But experimentation is not maturity, and experiments don't inherently create value when scaled. And that's where maturity comes into play. So maturity is when AI delivers that repeatable value, reduces operational risk, and scales impact across functions rather than staying confined to, those experiments. Early wins are valuable, but scaling requires different capabilities than piloting. And running these pilots or buying tools and rolling them out to teams don't necessarily automatically create that organizational capability. The question isn't, are we using AI? It's, are we positioned to scale it? Because scaling AI requires more than just access to models. It requires that organizational readiness. And as you're working through your AI experiments, validating assumptions and outcomes, you also need to think about how to mature the experiments so that it scales. So, this is a great way to look at what you're trying to do, and in terms of like a slightly different lens than what we've been talking about previously. If AI isn't aligned to your real business priorities, it's always going to remain an experiment. If it isn't tied to measurable outcomes, it's never going to become essential for your teams. If teams don't trust it or know how to apply it, it gets ignored. If governance doesn't keep pace, risk grows faster than the value. If data foundation isn't strong, the results won't be either. AI maturity and data maturity do move together in parallel. Each successful AI experimentation, should leave the organization stronger than it was before, regardless of whether that experiment matures into a wider use product within your organization. So before I wrap up here, I just want to leave you with some data from Gartner that states that 60% of AI projects are abandoned due to the lack of AI-ready data, which is quite high. Organizations that successfully scale AI aren't experimenting more, they're strengthening their foundations while they experiment. And this is one of the key differences where companies are being more successful with their AI initiatives. So with that, I'd like to thank you for your time. I hope you've learned something helpful today. And it's that time for questions. So I'd like to open up the floor and invite any questions that you might have. Questions at the moment. So one of the things I was thinking about is the 4 pillars of quality, governance, integration, and usability. And I was trying to think, like, which of those are more the barriers to a successful AI experimentation or AI use? And I was thinking about it, and even though they're all important in their own ways, I would say integration is probably one of the most important ones. Just because if you don't have the data, AI just simply doesn't know where to start. Sometimes depending on what your initiative is, you might not need to do integrations to get the AI outputs you're aiming for. But it tends to be one of the ones that can be a blocker early on.
Hey, Chris, we have a question in our chat from one of our attendees.
Yeah. Are there small steps we can take to make my data more uniform for better data quality? Yeah, that's a great question. There's a lot of different ways that you can look at data, and the structuring and consistency is kind of the key element. So depending on what data you're looking at, I consider there being structured data and unstructured data. Structured data is like your ERP transactions, right? It's workflow, it's master data. Most of the data that's in SAP and ERP systems are structured data. And then you have unstructured data, which is documents, emails, chats, transcripts, that kind of stuff. So it really depends on the type of data that you're looking at for being more uniform or improving the quality. Inherently, you kind of get lucky with transactional data. It generally has higher quality baked into it, but there's a lot of different things that you can do. So like when you look at, well, good quality data, well, it comes down to perhaps rules that you have on the data entry, making sure that data completeness is part of your workflow, so that users can't put in bad data or can't, miss putting in information. So it really depends on what you're looking for, but quality has various different, tentacles as we look at how to ratchet up and improve the quality of that information.
Chris, I was just going to piggyback off that and throw some comments back to our customer example. Actually, we're talking about, I think just a couple recommendations on, how to make your data capture more higher quality. To that point, I think some really simple stuff, right? Like, don't create duplicate records, right? It's easily said, but it's actually really hard to control in a big organization. So really clamping down on duplicate records. And if we have duplicate records, clean them up instantly. When we talk about customers and the different data elements that just would exist within a customer, sometimes we might be inclined to look at a particular field that's not being used for something, but it's close enough to some kind of need that we have. And so we use that for another purpose than what the field was originally intended for. I think in yesteryears, that was okay. But as we move forward into solutions like a data layer, a data fabric, these solutions that are looking at, a record and are looking at data, and also looking at how that data is connected and used, those semantics, right, the intention behind that field and how it was intended to be used become really important. So if we aren't using the records or the fields how they were intended to be used, that can cause downstream problems. So yeah, keep the records not duplicated, use the fields that you need to run your business and use them for the intended purposes. The last one I think that Chris had around, some rules around entry would be some owners around customers, like who actually in your company, like what team is actually responsible for making sure that customer master data is correct, is complete, is accurate. If it's not, gets updated. And, similar question for data ownership around material master, right? Or employee master. Those are just some really small steps. They're hard to exercise, but with very small steps putting in place and then just continuing to build on that habit and teaching data literacy essentially across the team and why it's important, that would be where I would start. Just looking at the chat, I don't see any other questions.
Oh, I don't either. Yeah.
That have showed up.
Nope, I don't think we have anything else.
All right. So if you're not comfortable speaking up or asking questions, but do want to learn a little bit more or have a deeper conversation about your specific, problem or challenge or opportunity, please feel free to reach out. We'd like to learn more about how we can help you on your AI journey.
Actually, we have one more question. This is from another attendee in the chat.
Oh, yeah, another question. Rob's got, what learnings do you have from your own AI adoption? Chris, I'll take that if you're okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. My first comments on that would really be around, and Chris talked about it around kind of education and literacy. So really, really important is these are definitely changing times, and we've got all kinds of technology out there, all kinds of different AI technology and capabilities to be used. And that's just a lot of change. And actually the hardest part in adopting any tools like AI within an organization at scale in an enterprise is organizational change. So definitely number one, have your team get around, the technical, security, privacy, data aspects of that tool. But while you're doing that, and even more important than that, is having a strategy and a plan around how you're going to actually roll this out to the teams, to the people, and helping them understand, that you're bringing this as a way to augment their skills, not replace them, and to advance their careers and their capabilities, not replace them. because there's a lot of just inherent fears that people have still today with using these kinds of tools and technologies. And so that education piece and helping them along the AI journey through the teams and organization is actually one of the biggest learnings, that we've had in rolling these kinds of things out. Yeah.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that, Chris.
All right. We got one more coming in the chat here. It looks like Julian's typing away.
Yes, the question is, what are the signs that an organization is not ready to pursue AI because of its ERP or data foundation, and how should an organization be prioritizing these sorts of projects? Yeah, very interesting question. I think a lot of people think AI, like if you don't have these data foundations perfect, you can't do AI, you're not going to be successful with it. And I don't believe that's necessarily true. There's always something that is good, that's working, where AI can help accelerate. And I like to look at AI like a lens of accelerating individuals. And like to Chris's point earlier, it's about helping people and improving their outputs. And so there's always something that's working within organizations. So I don't think any organization should not be pursuing, some sort of AI initiatives. Obviously having more modern ERP or better data practices. Those are definitely going to be investments that you've done previously that are going to help you be further along the road. If you're in a situation where some of your data is really struggling, that's when you may have to go down a data quality type project just to kind of clean things up. Yeah, that's kind of my take on it. Chris, what are your thoughts on that one?
I love this question. When it comes to data, where do we start, right? Like we want to do AI, where do we start? The straightforward answer is Chris Brooks is talking back to the different, it's strategy, it's strategic alignment. What are the biggest business problems that your business has today that you're trying to solve? And start with that problem and understand it really, really well. Who cares the most about that? Why do they care about it? And, once you start unpacking that, you'll start finding that there's certain KPIs that exist or don't exist, maybe around measuring that particular problem. You want to make sure that those exist because those are the things that are going to start as you move backwards, figuring out the different data elements that exist within your organization to figure out different options for a solution to then bring that data and solve towards that business problem. So it really is the business problem. The last thing I would just offer on the data, there's a school of thought out there that exists to say, first, we need to get all of our data, move it over here, get it all cleaned up, and then we're going to do AI. There's another school of thought that exists, which is more aligned to what I was talking around, start with a business problem, where you pull just those data elements that you need to solve just that business problem and you get that done and you do it really, 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 really good, right? And you get just that piece cleaned up. Then you do the next one, right? The next biggest business problem, you find its data elements and you pull that along. And as you continue to do this and you have success doing it, you will be laying in the right pieces on your data foundation, and you'll be getting wins along the way rather than spending all this time and money to lift up your data, move it over somewhere, do all of that cleaning stuff that you have to do. It'll take a long time and cost a lot of money before you even have a win in terms of solving a business problem. So those are the two things I would say. Align to your strategy, the most strategic business problems, and just pull along the data that you need to solve those ones and keep doing it. All right, I think with that, we're at time, so we should wrap it up.
Yeah, that's perfect. Well, thank you so much, everyone. And in the coming days or weeks, I believe this presentation will be shared with you, and hope you learned something today.
Yeah, thanks for joining, everybody. Have a good rest of your day. Bye.
Bye.